Forward! The awful truth about Captain Underpants.
Hi everybody, and welcome to another one of our disastrous misadventures.
Before we get started, check out this comic book to get the full scoop of our story so far. Go! Once upon a time, there are two cool kids named George and Harold.
We the man!
Me too! They had a mean old principal named Mr. KRUPP.
Gar? Hey Bubs, blah blah blah.
One time, Mr. KRUPP punished George and Harold.
You have to obey my orders.
So they got a 3D hinder ring and hypnotized him. No way, you must obey us now!
Okay.
They made him think he was a superhero.
You are now Captain Underpants!
Yes, master.
It was supposed to be a joke.
Tra-la-la!
But it got carried too far.
I will go fight crime now.
Way too far. Hey, come back here, bub!
Tra-la-la!
Then one day, he got attacked by a dandelion. Don't you hate when that happens?
Help!
So George stole some superpower juice from a UFO.
Ouchie!
And gave it to him.
Don't touch!
Suddenly, he got superpowers.
Hey, I can fly now. I rule!
Oh, great!
Bummer.
Nowadays, whenever Mr. KRUPP hears anybody snap their fingers, he turns to the you-know-who.
Tra-la-la!
Uh-oh!
Not again! And the only way you can stop him is if you pour water on his head.
What the?
Then he turns back into Mr. KRUPP.
What's the big idea, Bubs?
So whatever you do, don't snap your fingers around Mr. KRUPP, okay? The end. Chapter 1. George and Harold. This is George Spear and Harold Hutchins. George is the kid on the left with the tie and the flat top. Harold's the one on the right with the t-shirt and the bad haircut. Remember that now? Remember that now? George and Harold's grades in school were much like whales in the ocean. They rarely rose above sea level. Melvin Sneedley, however, he's the kid down there with the bow tie and the glasses, always got straight A's. Because Melvin was so academically gifted, people just assumed he was a lot smarter than George and Harold. But that wasn't true. You see, George and Harold were every bit as smart as the straight A students, but in a different way. In a way that it couldn't be measured by quizzes or worksheets. Maybe George and Harold couldn't spell very well or remember their multiplication tables. Perhaps their grammar was no good either. But when it came to saving the entire planet from the nasty forces of unrivaling evil, there was nobody better than George Beard and Harold Hutchins. It's a good thing that George and Harold were smart enough to get themselves out of trouble, because their silliness always gets them into trouble. In fact, one time, it got them into a really snotty situation. But before I can tell you that story, I had to tell you this story. Chapter 2. Squishies Part 1. It was demonstration speech day in Miss Riddle's 4th grade English class. Every student had to give an overall report demonstrating how to do something. First up there are Team Brownski and Steven Lupner, who demonstrated how to give a speech that they hadn't prepared for. They got a D-. Next up were Jennifer Gordon and Stephanie Warkoff, who demonstrated how to cook frozen lasagna in a pop-up toaster. After the firemen left, it was George and Harold's turn. Harold carefully tackled some charts and grabbed some to the wall, while George brought a large garbage can with a toilet seat taped to the top.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Said George.
Today, Harold and I are going to demonstrate how to do a squishy. First, you need 2 packs of ketchup in the toilet seat.
Next, said Harold as he pointed to the display chart, you must fold the ketchup packs in half and carefully place them under the toilet seat. Make sure that the packs are under those 2 bumpy thingies on the bottom of the seat. Now once the ketchup packs are in place, said Harold, all you have to do is wait for somebody to sit down in the toilet seat. Do we have any volunteers?
Come on!
Said George.
Who wants a squishy?
Although nobody in the class wanted to sit on the toilet seat, everybody wanted to see what would happen if somebody actually did. So George grasped one side of the toilet seat, Harold grasped the other, and together they pushed down. Splat! Splat! Everybody in the class was thrilled, except for the 2 kids sitting directly in front of the toilet seat who were somewhat less than thrilled.
Hooray, squishies!
The children shouted. Now normally, George and Harold's teacher, Miss Riddle, would have been very angry about this particular demonstration speech. She would have yelled on and on about impetatable behavior and how it's not nice to spray ketchup into people's underwear, but Miss Riddle has changed quite a bit since the last book. Now she was all about fun. Come on, kids! Shouted Miss Riddle. Let's run all the cafeteria grab some ketchup packs! Squishies for everybody! Hooray! cried the children as they bounded to their seats and dashed towards the classroom door.
Not so fast!
Shouted Melvin Sneedley, who stood blocking the door with his arms spread defiantly.
You got it so immature.
Chapter 3: The COMBINE-O-TRON 2000. Melvin Sneedley, the school brainiac, was not about to let everybody leave the classroom until he's given his demonstration speech.
We still have 50 minutes left before lunch,
said Melvin.
And that's just enough time for me to demonstrate my new invention, the COMBINE-O-TRON 2000.
Warned Melvin's classmates. The children all slumped back to their seats while Melvin pushed a plastic rolling cart in front of the classroom. On top of the car there was a hamster, a small robot, which Melvin built himself, and a strange looking contraction shaped like an ice cream cone.
Today,
said Melvin,
I will demonstrate how to turn an ordinary hamster into your very own bionic cyber slave.
Melvin placed his pet hamster Sulu at one end of the cart and a tiny homemade robot on the other end.
I shall now combine this ordinary hamster with this tiny robot using the COMBINE-O-TRON 2000.
Melvin picked up the COMBINE-O-TRON 2000 and turned it on. A high-pitched tone filled the classroom air, getting higher and higher in frequency as the machine charged to full power. Melvin typed some last-minute calculations into the keyboard on the side of the COMBINE-O-TRON 2000 as its laser excitor warmed up. Suddenly, two streaks of red glowing light flashed onto Sulu and the tiny robot. The COMBINE-O-TRON 2000 began assimilating information on the two elements. It was about to combine.
Don't worry, kids,
said Melvin.
This producer is totally painless. Solo won't feel a thing.
Finally, a computerized voice started the countdown.
COMBINE-O will mix in 5 seconds. COMBINE-O will mix in 4 seconds. COMBINE-O will mix in 3 seconds. COMBINE-O will mix in 1 second. COMBINE-O will mix in 1 second.
BLAZZZT! A burst of brilliant white light shot out the COMBINE-O-TRON 2000 and formed a ball of energy between Sulu and the tiny robot. The hamster and the robot began to slide closer and closer together until they disappeared into the energy ball. The smell of burned matches and pickle relish filled the air as the hot blaze of energetic wind knocked the books off the shelves and sent papers flying. Suddenly there was a blinding flash of light, a quick puff of smoke, and it was all over. Melvin pulled off his goggles. No longer were a hamster and a robot sitting on the cart before him. Now the hamster and the robot were in one, combined at the cellular level. The worldly first self-contained, warm-blooded, fuzzy bionic cyborg.
Eureka!
Shouted Melvin.
It worked! I have created a cybernetic life form.
The children looked on as Melvin waved the metal detector over the hamster and the reading went off the chart. One of the children raised his hand with a question.
Yes?
Said Melvin, enthusiastically.
Can we go to the lunchroom and get our ketchup packs now?
But, no!
Screamed Melvin.
Will you forget about squishies for 1 minute? I've just created the world's first snotty hamster, and nobody's leaving this room until I've demonstrated his undying omniscience.
Chapter 4: Bad Sulu. Sulu didn't seem to know that he had just undergone a downgrade transformation. He didn't act any differently. He just wandered across the top of the plastic rolling cart, sniffing everything around him, only stopping occasionally to scratch his ear or rub his whiskers. But poor Sulu was in for a big surprise.
Sulu,
said Melvin.
I am your master, and you'll obey my commands. I want you to demonstrate your new powers for the class. Do a super bionic jump across the room.
Sulu did not respond.
Sulu,
said Melvin sternly.
Crush that plastic rolling cart in your bare paws.
Sulu did not respond.
Sulu,
Melvin shouted.
Go outside, pick up a car, and throw it across the parking lot.
Sulu did not respond. Finally, Melvin reached into his book bag and took out a red ping pong paddle he had designed especially for this occasion.
Sulu,
he said angrily.
Do as I say, or you're going to get a good spanking.
This time, Sulu did respond. When he saw the ping pong battle, he became very frightened, and his little hamster insects took over. Sulu jumped into the air, grabbed the ping pong paddle into his right paw, and then yanked Melvin into the plastic rolling cart with his left paw. The children finally stopped thinking about ketchup packs and toilets for a moment and settled in to watch the show. Chapter 5: The Incredibly Graphic Violence Chapter Part 1.
Warning, the following chapter contains graphic depictions of a mean little boy getting spanked by a bionic hamster. While this event is presented for humorous effect, the producers of this book acknowledge that hamster attacks are no laughing matter. If you or someone you love has been the victim of a hamster attack, we strongly urge you to get help by seeking out a local support group in your area or by visiting you when hamsters attack.
Introducing Flipper! The only problem with incredibly graphic violence is that it's hardly ever fun.
Well, all that's changed since the invention of Check it out.
Spanks for the memories! Chapter 6, The Aftermath. Although SULU haven't really spanked Melvin very hard, Melvin wailed and blubbered and carried on anyway.
You're a bad hamster!
Melvin cried.
I never want to see you again as long as I live.
Melvin ran out of the class sobbing. The rest of the class, including Mr. Earl, followed him laughing and chanting, "Squishies! Squishies! Squishies!" But Josh and Hal stayed behind and conformed the forgotten hamster.
Don't feel bad, SULU.
Said George.
Melvin is a real meanie.
Yeah, said Harold. Do you want to come live with us? You can live out in our treehouse. SULU jumped onto Harold's shoulder and licked his face. Then he jumped over to George's shoulder and licked his face too. I think we just adopted a bionic hamster, said Harold. So George stuck their new pal into his shirt pocket, and the three friends went off to lunch. Chapter 7, Mr. KRUPP. About that very same time, the school principal, Mr. KRUPP, came marching into the office in a particularly foul mood. He stopped beside Miss Anthro's desk, huffing and puffing.
Where's my coffee, Edith?
He shouted. Get it yourself, Tommy! Miss Anthro shouted back.
I don't need your whip today, woman.
Mr. KRUPP growled.
I just want my coffee, and I want it now.
Well, give me a cup too while you're at it.
Miss Anthro growled back.
Arrgh!
Screamed Mr. KRUPP in frustration as he grabbed a newspaper and headed for the faculty restroom. Miss Rebel was standing beside the restroom door, smiling and trying very hard not to laugh.
What are you looking at?
Mr. KRUPP sneered as he pushed his way past Miss Rebel and slammed the restroom door behind him. Inside the restroom, you can hear the faint sounds of bell buckling, jingling, a zipper unzipping, some clothes rustling, and finally, splat! Splat! Screamed Mr. KRUPP from inside the restroom. In a few moments, the door from the faculty restroom flew open.
I'm going to get George and Harold for this.
Mr. KRUPP screamed. They didn't do it! Laughed Miss Rebel. I did! It's School Squishy! It's the latest fab!
Yeah, right. Very funny,
said Mr. KRUPP.
Now, where are all those two kids? I just know they're responsible.
As Mr. KRUPP headed for the cafeteria, he noticed that he wasn't the only person to fall victim to the dreaded squishies. All throughout the hallway, angry first, second, third, fifth, and sixth graders were complaining about ketchup stains in their pants, socks, legs, and underwear. Mr. KRUPP stormed into the cafeteria and headed for the fourth graders' table.
George and Harold,
shouted Mr. KRUPP.
I've got ketchup on my underwear because of you two, and so do half of the kids in this school.
We didn't do it, said Harold.
Yeah!
Said a few of the other fourth graders.
George
are
innocent.
Oh, no they're not!
Said a voice from the other end of the table. It was Melvin Sneedley. Besides being the school brainiac, Melvin was also famous for being the school tattletale.
George and Harold taught everybody a trick today, where you put ketchup packs under a toilet seat and make it spray on people's legs.
Melvin reported proudly.
Thank you, Melvin,
said Mr. KRUPP. He turned to George and Harold and pointed at the cafeteria door.
Mr. Beard and Mr. Hutchins, out!
Chapter 8. The comic is mightier than the spitball. George and Harold went straight to the detention room. Man, said Harold, Melvin's such a tattletale. Somebody out to teach him a lesson.
And we're just the guys to do it,
said George. So George and Harold created an all-new comic book featuring everybody's favorite tattletale and meanie, Melvin Sneedley. When they were done, the two boys sneaked into the detention room to run off copies of their latest work and sell them in the hallway. The new comic was a great success. Everybody loved it. Well, everybody but Melvin Sneedley, I should say. As Melvin walked to his last class of the day, he noticed a small group of students in the hallway reading comics together and giggling. Normally, this was enough to make Melvin run straight to the principal's office and tell everybody on unsupervised reading, which was strictly forbidden. But today, Melvin noticed something strange. The common reading students were pointing and laughing at him.
What?
Said Melvin.
What's wrong? What are you guys laughing at?
Melvin looked around the hallway desperately. Everybody was laughing, everybody was pointing, and it was driving Melvin crazy. He marched over a group of second graders, grabbed the comic book out of their hands, and looked at the cover. Melvin was furious.
You guys are so immature!
Shrieked Melvin. He quickly darted off to read the comic in peace, but everywhere he ran, he came across more pointing and more laughing. Finally, Melvin thought of the one place he could read the comic in private. He went to the boys' bathroom, locked himself in one of the stalls, and sat down to read. Splat! Splat! As Melvin sat reading, his legs dripping with ketchup, he became angrier and angrier.
I'm gonna get George and Harold,
Melvin vowed. Chapter 9! Captain Underpants and the terrifying tale of the TATTLE-TROW 2000! Once upon a time, there was a dumb kid named Melvin who was a big tattletale.
I'm telling.
Everywhere he went, he caused grief and misery.
I'm telling.
Until one day...
I'm telling. Hey cops, that guy just robbed the bank.
Gee, thanks, kid. You are under arrest. Hey, kid, we solved the crime of the century.
And so... Melvin had become so popular that he decided to run for mayor.
I'm telling.
He won the last game victory.
Congratulations! You're the youngest mayor ever!
Yes, and I'm going to make some big changes.
So Mayor Melvin made a bunch of dumb new rules, and people getting arrested left and right.
You're under arrest.
But I didn't do anything.
Busted.
And they all got sent to jail.
Ha ha ha!
Suddenly...
Mayor Melvin, all the jails are full.
I'll build a big robo-jail and catch these lawbreakers myself.
So he built the TATTLE-TROW 2000. Soon Mayor Melvin was off catching lawbreakers.
That'll teach you.
Then Melvin headed for the school. Help! The TATTLE-TROW 2000 is ran across the soccer field and squished the gym teacher.
Oh no, we just planted that grass. This looks like a job for...
Underpants!
What's up, Bob? We'll go.
You're going to jail for busting the roof.
But Captain Underpants was faster than a speeding wasteman, more powerful than boxer shorts, and able to leap tall buildings without getting a wedgie.
Tra-la-la!
Captain Underpants wanted to find the robot, but he didn't want to hurt the people inside. Then he got an idea.
Hey, what the? Uh-oh.
We're free.
Ah!
Soon there was nobody left inside the TATTLE-TROW 2000, except for Melvin.
Uh-oh, I'm telling.
And so, hooray for Captain Underpants!
You guys are so immature.
Then everybody got sent free.
Tra-la-la! We're free and stuff.
Yay! Yippee! Gip gip!
Yeah.
The end. Treehouse Comics Inc. Chapter 10. Mad Mr. Melvin. Melvin was furious. He ripped the comic book in half and tossed it into his shoulder. Then he washed his hands in the toilet and stormed out of the restroom.
I'm gonna get George and Harold for that.
Said Melvin.
I'm gonna teach them a lesson they'll never forget.
After school, Melvin grabbed his COMBINE-O-TRON 2000 and headed home. Melvin's mother and father were both busy working on a top-secret government experiment when Melvin walked into the front door.
Hello, son.
Said Melvin's father.
How was your day at school?
Terrible.
Said Melvin.
Nobody in school has tons of respect for my beautiful mind. Those dual-witted, lie-brained, gum-chewing idiots are more impressed with comic books than they are with the wonders of silence. But I shall teach them. I shall teach them all. Ha 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 ha!
That's nice, honey.
Said Melvin's mom. Melvin marched up to his room to begin building on a brand new superpowered robot. But when he opened his bedroom door, he saw the family's pet cat, Cinderella, sleeping quietly on his bed.
Hey!
Melvin screamed.
What are you doing in my room, you stupid cat? You know I'm allergic to you. Now get out and... achoo! Stay out!
After a few hours, Melvin has built his newest and most powerful robot ever, which had 3 sets of interchangeable laser eyeballs, microhydraulic jumbotronic legs, super slum ballistic auto arms, and was powered by 3 separate twin turbo 9000 SP5 Kung Fu titanium lithium alloy processors, which were all built into a vertically indestructible flexochromatic skeleton that has the power to punch through cinder blocks, crush steel in its vise-like grasp, and plow merciless through a poorly written out of sentences. It could also slice bagels,
That ought to do the trick.
said Melvin, whipping his nose on a tissue.
Now all I have to do is, achoo! Combine my body with this dynamic robot, and I'll show you the most powerful boy who, achoo, ever lived.
Chapter 11. Melvin's Fantasy. As Melvin set up the COMBINE-O-TRON 2000 and make the proper adjustments, he imagined what his life would be like as the world's first bionic boy. He imagined himself walking into school the next day with his arms swinging confidently as he crashed through the classroom wall. The girls would swoon as Melvin talked for hours about the amazing world of science. Miss River will probably let Melvin sit at her desk from now on because Melvin's new buns of steel will be too massive to fit into an ordinary children's chair. Maybe Mr. KRUPP will invite the governor to visit the school so he could show his smartest and most powerful student. If so, the governor will probably declare a new holiday, National Melvin Sneedley Day, a day when kids all over the world will get extra homework and pop quizzes to honor the glorious name of Melvin. But the best part of all would be George and Harold's reaction. They would be so terrified by Melvin's incredible size and strength, they'll drop to their knees and beg for mercy. But Melvin would spare them only if they agreed to be his slaves for all eternity. They had to carry his books, sharpen his pencils, and be his personal footstools during each class.
Life is gonna be, achoo, rule.
Said Melvin. Chapter 12. The Night of the Nasty Nostril Nuggets. Melvin turned on the COMBINE-O-TRON 2000. A high-pitched tone pierced the air, getting higher and higher in frequency as the machine charged to full power. Oops, said Melvin as he quickly turned the dramatic effects settings to off so he wouldn't disturb his parents. Silently, the machine continued to charge as Melvin entered calculations to account to his clothes and glasses. When the laser extractor has finally warmed up, Melvin stepped in front of the COMBINE-O-TRON 2000, standing perfectly still beside his new robot. Suddenly, 2 streaks of red glowing light flashed onto Melvin and the robot as the COMBINE-O-TRON 2000 began assimilating information on the 2 elements. It was about to combine. Finally, a computerized voice started the countdown.
Commenced in 5 seconds.
Melvin stood perfectly still.
Commenced in 4 seconds.
Melvin's nose began to twitch.
Commenced in 3 seconds.
Suddenly, Melvin felt an uncontrollable urge. He cupped his hands over his mouth and nose, and his eyes squeezed closed involuntarily.
Commenced in 1 seconds.
Achoo!
Melvin looked down at his hands, which are now glistering with mucus and crusty chunks of semi-dry booklets. Instantly, the COMBINE-O-TRON 2000 began recalculating its elements at its laser sights.
Combining 3 elements in 1 second.
3 elements?
Melvin screamed in horror.
What's the 3rd element?
Quickly, Melvin's eyes darted around the room searching for a new element that had accidentally made its way into the sights of the laser extractor.
What's the 3rd element?
He screamed again. He looked down at his crusty, dripping, film-filmed arms.
Uh-oh.
Said Melvin as the blinding burst of light enveloped him. BLAZZZT! Chapter 13. The next day. The next day, Melvin didn't show up for school on time. Nobody really seemed to notice though because all the children were excited about show and tell. Almost everybody had brought in really lame stuff like books or awards, but George and Harold had something that was totally cool.
Everybody remembers SULU from yesterday, right?
Said George.
Well, we took him home to live with us in our treehouse.
And we taught him the greatest trick, said Harold. The 2 boys carried SULU over to the classroom window and opened up. Harold pulled a large watermelon out of his book bag and showed it to Sulu.
Okay, Sulu,
Said George.
show everybody your new trick.
In one swift motion, Sulu placed his mouth onto the watermelon and shoved the entire thing in his left cheek. The 4th graders were stunned. No, said Harold. That's not the trick. The trick is what happens next. Sulu looked out the window and eyed a dead tree at the far end of the empty playground. Sulu began to chew up the watermelon and pluck his tiny hamster lips and spit. The watermelon seeds fell out of Sulu's mouth, hitting their target with expert precision. In no time at all, the dead tree at the end of the playground was reduced to a pile of twigs and sawdust. The children cheered as George and Harold patted their amazing little bionic body. George and Harold didn't think that anybody could beat their show and tell display, but they were wrong, because at that very moment, Melvin Sneedley was dripping down the hallway towards the classroom door. Melvin hadn't brought anything for show and tell. Melvin was the show and tell. Chapter 14. The Unnecessarily Disgusting Chapter.
Notice, the following chapter is extremely gross. To avoid nausea, projectile vomiting, or other gastrointestinal unpleasantries, please refrain from eating for at least 1 hour before editing this chapter. You won't want to eat after editing it, let me assure you.
All the 4th graders were cheering and patting Sulu as the classroom door slowly opened. A greenish, glistering behemoth entered the room, filling the air with sounds of gleaming metal gears and wet, gooey, bursting bubbles. Some of the girls screamed. Some of the boys did too.
You guys are so immature,
Said the horrible beast. At once, the children recognized the terrifying creature that stood before them. Melvin! They cried.
Yes, it's me.
Gurgled the wet, jiggly monster angrily. His eyes and nose were dripping with warm, greenish, custard-like mucus. His robotic arms were caked with massive globs of crispy, shimmering snot. And as he turned to close the classroom door behind him, part of his hands came out of the doorknob. It oozed slowly down the door, leaving behind a chunky trail of moist excretion. Melvin squished and sloshed as he jiggled over to his chair. Each gooey footstep covered the floor with foamy trail of slime, and everywhere he touched became wet and encrusted with warm, bubbly, syrupy film. When Melvin sat down, generously helpings of yellowish, putty-like goo slowly dribbled down the chair, collecting into creamy, gelatinous puddles beneath him. The puddles themselves were slightly transparent and speckled with thick, shrimply nose hairs and dark red chunks of encoded blood which—
Alright already!
yelled George to the narrator.
Enough of the descriptions! You're making us so sick!
Thank you, George, said Miss Errol. Now, Melvin, why don't you tell us all what happened to you?
Well,
Said Melvin.
I tried to combine myself with a bionic robot last night, but I accidentally sneezed at the last second.
So, you got combined with a robot and boogers?
Asked George.
Yeah,
Said Melvin.
but don't worry. I'm building a Cybertron 1000, which will reverse the effects and turn me back into a boy again. It will just take 6 months to finish.
6 months? Said Harold.
Hey, slow communication is a highly complex minutiae.
Said Melvin.
It's not like building a robot. It takes time.
You should try taking the batteries out of that Combine-O thingy and putting them in backwards.
Suggested George.
That might reverse the effect.
Melvin rolled his thick, bubbling, crust-covered infrared eyes.
That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
He gurgled. Chapter 15. The New Melvin. You might think that turning into a Bionic Booger Boy was the worst thing that could ever happen to a kid, but it wasn't all bad. Believe it or not, there's actually a positive side of being a lumbering, loogie lad. For instance, Melvin now won every football game he played, because nobody wanted to tackle him. And when he served a volleyball, nobody on the other team would dare to hit the ball back. Besides being the school's new sports star, there were other perks too. Melvin never had to wait in line at the drinking fountain anymore. Now he has his own personal drinking fountain because, well, would you use a drinking fountain after a Bionic Booger Boy has gobbled all over it? I didn't think so. Oh, the special attention that Melvin was receiving made some of the other kids a little jealous. But not George and Harold. Considering many evil villains that George and Harold had been battling all year, the two boys were just grateful that Melvin hadn't turned himself into a gigantic, terrifying beast with plans to destroy the Earth. "It could be a lot worse," said Harold. "At least Melvin's not a terrifying evil villain,"
Yeah, you're right.
said George.
Can't think of anything that could turn Melvin into a terrifying evil villain.
Chapter 16. The Cold and Flu Season. Soon it was autumn, and the new season brought in many changes. Crisp, chilly air, early morning frost, and a bright, colorful leaves. But with the beauty of autumn came another change that wasn't quite so welcome. The cold and flu season. All throughout Joe Hort's elementary school, people were getting sick. The hallway was filled with runny noses, sneezy mouths, and atching bodies. But unfortunately, one of those noses, mouths, and bodies belonged to Melvin Sneedley. Every time Melvin sneezed, thousands of tiny driblets shot out of his mouth, splattering the chalkboard with a thin layer of foamy, glistering, yellowish-green, tapioca-like mucus. "Don't forget to cover your mouth, Melvin, dear," said Miss Ribble.
Oh, sorry.
Said Melvin.
Sorry.
He put his hand over his mouth and sneezed again. This time, the explosion of the air from its stifled sneeze blew off large web globs of his body, which spread over the entire classroom. It was as if somebody set off a giant firecracker inside of a bucket of green paint. The warm, smelly goo smacked into people's hair, splattered onto their clothes, and it seems to drench every square inch of the room. "On second thought, Melvin," said Miss Ribble, "don't cover your mouth next time. Now, who wants a cookie?" Chapter 17. The Field Trip. The next day, for some strange reason, Miss Ribble was out sick with a cold. Mr. KRUPP was filling in as the substitute teacher, and, as usual, he was very angry.
What the heck is going on in this room?
He yelled,
What's with all the raincoats and umbrellas?
and Melvin sneezed. A few moments later, Mr. KRUPP returned to the classroom with fresh clothes, a raincoat, and an umbrella.
Alright everybody,
He shouted.
today is field trip day. Miss KRUPP and I are taking you all to Snotty Bro's tissue factory to see how blow rags are made.
The word tissue made Melvin jump.
No!
He cried in a panic.
Me don't like tissues!
An eerie silence fell over the classroom. Everybody looked at Melvin in shock. "Did Melvin just say, 'Me don't like tissues'?" asked Harold.
Yeah.
Said George.
I never heard him misuse an objective pronoun before. Who does he think he is? Einstein?
Chapter 18. Things Get Bad. In a few hours, the 4th graders were packed into a hot, stinky factory listening to a boring speech about how trees turn into tissues or something like that. Nobody was paying attention, really, except for Melvin Sneedley, who was terrified. His whole body shook and shimmered as the tour took them down to a narrow walkways of the noisy industrial plant. Finally, the tour ended at the gift shop, where the plant manager, Mr. Snotty, had a surprise for everybody.
"Behind this red curtain with black dots on it
Said Mr. Snotty.
is a free gift for each of you.
Mr. Snotty pulled back the curtain to reveal a pile of simple tissue packs.
Help yourselves.
Said Mr. Snotty.
There's enough for everybody."
No!
Screamed Melvin.
Me don't like tissues!
Oh, don't be silly.
Said Mr. Snotty.
Everybody loves tissues, and our tissues are extra absorbent. They really help to wipe out phlegm and mucus.
No!
Screamed Melvin again.
Tissues is bad magic!
Nonsense.
Laughed Mr. Snooty. He tossed a couple of simple tissue packs at Melvin.
Here you go, young man.
He said.
Enjoy.
The tissue packs flipped through the air and stuck onto Melvin's back. Melvin screamed. His eyes began to glow green as he beat his chest in anger. Suddenly, Melvin's shoulders started to bubble. His chest expanded. The flexochromatic steel in Melvin's exoskeleton flexed and grew. His neck and head widened and his body swelled to a height of 13 feet. Melvin grabbed the tissue packs in his massive, dripping fingers and flung them to the ground.
Don't make me angry!
Melvin warned.
You don't like me when I angry.
Oops.
Said Mr. Snotty.
You dropped your tissue packs, young fellow. Here's some more for you.
Mr. Snotty grabbed 2 giant handfuls of simple tissue packs and tossed them at Melvin. Chapter 19. Things Get Better. Frantically, Melvin swept out the 9 new tissue packs stuck to his upper torso as they were a swarm of stinking bumblebees. He stormed out his giant spiked feet and thrashed about violently as his hulking body doubled, then tripled in size. Melvin kicked and punched the walls of the gift shop as he let out a terrifying, blood-curdling cry.
There's no need to cry, little man.
Said Mr. Snotty.
Here, have some more tissues to dry those tears.
He tossed several more sample tissue packs at Melvin. As you might have noticed by now, Mr. Snotty wasn't exactly the brightest ball in a Hano country. What happened next could only be described as chaos. Once again, Melvin's massive body tripled in size. By now, Melvin was roaring and kicking and knocking over giant machines. The children screamed and ran. Mr. Snotty thought it might help matters if he could just drop Melvin some more tissues. But before he could, a drop of mucus the size of a bathtub dripped on Melvin's massive nose and splashed down on Mr. Snotty, gluing him to the floor. George had held hid behind a red curtain with black dots on it as Melvin crashed through the roof of the factory. Ear-pleasing roars barreled down his gigantic, oozing mouth as he kicked down the walls of the factory and tossed heavy machinery into the parking lot. Mr. Krupp and Miss Central tried their best to get the situation under control, but they weren't having much luck.
Hey, Bob.
Shouted Mr. Krupp.
I had just about enough of your shenanigans. Hey, Bob.
Shouted Mr. Krupp.
I had just about enough of your shenanigans.
You're gonna be spending the afternoon detention if you don't settle down yet, man.
Shouted Miss Anthro. Suddenly, Melvin reached down and grabbed Miss Anthro in his massive metal fist.
Help me!
She screamed.
Somebody save me!
Said Mr. Krupp nervously.
Oh, I'll go get some help.
Mr. Krupp ran and hid with George and Harold behind the red curtain with black dots on it.
Hey, I thought you were going to go get some help,
said Harold.
Well, not today.
Said Mr. Krupp.
No,
Said George.
there's only one person who can help Miss Anthro right now.
Who's that?
Asked Mr. Krupp. Chapter 20. Captain Underpants, that's who! As much as George and Harold hated to do that, they decided that it was time to send Captain Underpants to save the day. George snapped his fingers. Suddenly, the terror and panic that Mr. Krupp has been experiencing completely vanished. A wild, silly grin spread across his face as he leaped to his feet and ripped his outer clothing and toupee. Mr. Krupp's transformation to Captain Underpants was almost complete. The only thing he was missing was a cape.
Gee,
He said.
I sure wish I could find a red curtain with black dots on it.
Hey,
Said George as he pointed to the red curtain with black dots on it.
there's a red curtain with black dots on it.
What a remarkably unexpected coincidence.
Said Captain Underpants as he ripped his latest in the series and convoluted plot devices tied around his neck. By this time, Melvin had stomped his way out of the factory and into the downtown area, leaving behind a twisted path of mucus-coated destruction. Captain Underpants flew into the air, following the trail of terror, until he was face to face with a snot-spewing cyborg.
I'd order you to stop.
Said Captain Underpants.
In the name of all that is pre-shrunken cottony.
Melvin did not listen. Captain Underpants had no choice but to fight the boogery behemoth. But first he needed to save Miss Anthro. Quickly our hero flew into the left side, grabbed her hands, and pulled firmly. The slimy film that covered Melvin's gigantic fist was strong and gooey, but it was no match for wedgie power. Captain Underpants pulled and pulled until Miss Anthro was completely dislodged, with a noisy, wet, disgusting sound.
I'm free!
Cried Miss Anthro.
Let's get the heck out of here!
Suddenly, the Bionic Booger Boy reached down and grabbed Captain Underpants by the cape. The monster held it tightly with his gigantic, gooey, robotic fingers.
Ah!
Cried Captain Underpants.
He's got my cape! He's got my cape!
Well, just untie it!
Screamed Miss Anthro.
Let's go! Let's go!
But I can't fight crime without my cape!
Cried Captain Underpants.
Forget your stupid cape!
Edith screamed.
Just send me, you idiot!
Chapter 21. You can't have your gift and F too. As anybody will tell you, no superhero is complete without a cape. I mean, without a cape, a superhero is just a guy wearing fancy underwear. Well, in this case, not so fancy underwear. But Captain Underpants knew what had to be done. He reached up to his free hand and courageously untied his cape, finally sacrificing his aesthetic integrity to save the life of a mere mortal being. Captain Underpants and Miss Anthro were now free, but they weren't safe yet. The Bionic Booger Boy swung at our hero with all his might. Captain Underpants waved around Melvin's frantic, flying, film-flinging fist as he tried to find a safe space to land. Suddenly, Captain Underpants' 100% gun-powered vision spotted George and Harold miles away. With lightning speed, he flew down to meet the boys.
George and Harold,
Said Captain Underpants.
you've got to keep this woman safe while I destroy that robotic slime ball.
Okay, said Harold.
But hurry up! Here he comes! Wait!
Cried Miss Anthro.
I didn't get a chance to say thank you.
She turned and kissed Captain Underpants all over his face with wet, drooling smooches.
Thank you, thank you, thank you!
She said between each sloppy kiss. Yeah, said Harold.
Sure hope she doesn't thank us,
said George. When this Sandro has finished slopping all over Captain Underpants' face, she gave him a great big hug for good luck.
Now go get him, Tiger!
She said coyly, but Captain Underpants didn't move. She just stood there, staring blankly into space. Off in the distance, George and Harold could hear the Bionic Booger Boy approaching. Each thundering footstep brought the horrible beast closer and closer until he stood towering above them, panting heavily and dripping profanity. Miss Anthrope screamed and ran away.
Hurry, Captain Underpants!
cried Harold.
Do something! Do something! Do something!
Back, do something! Do something! Do something!
Yeah!
cried George.
Heck is Heine! Heck is Heine!
But Captain Underpants didn't move. He didn't fight, he didn't fly, he didn't kick anybody's hiney. In fact, the only thing he could do was get very, very angry.
What the heck is going on here, Bobs?
He screamed.
And why am I standing here in my underwear?
George and Harold didn't like the sound of that. Chapter 22. Welcome back, KRUPPER! If you read the comic on page 7 of this novel, then you know what happens whenever Captain Underpants gets water on his head. Unfortunately, Miss Anthrope's wet, sloppy kisses have produced the same effect. Captain Underpants has been turned into Mr. KRUPP, and now he was about to return to lunch. Quickly, George and Harold began frantically snapping their fingers. Again and again they snapped, but Mr. KRUPP's face was still slimy and wet with gooey kiss juice, and the snaps were having no effect at all. The mighty mucus monster shoved Mr. KRUPP into his gummy mouth and swallowed him whole, and then he came after George and Harold.
Help!
Screamed George. We're doomed! Screamed Harold. Chapter 23. SULU saves the day. Halfway across the city, a little plucky hamster by ears heard the terrified cries from his two-pet pal. Quickly, SULU jumped out his exercise wheel and crashed through the side of his plastic cage. Then, with a mighty leap, he bounded from the window of George and Harold's treehouse. At that very moment, Melvin was dandling George and Harold high above his mouth.
Ha ha ha!
Laughed the Bionic Booger Boy.
Me got you at last!
Well, goodbye, Harold,
said George. See you later, pal, said Harold. It was fun while it lasted. Finally, Melvin let go of George and Harold. The two boys screamed as they fell face first into his gooey, gaping mouth of the whoosh. The next thing George and Harold knew, they were flying sideways by an incredible speed. Everything around them was a blur of motion, except for the sight of their little buddy SULU, who had literally grabbed him from the murky mouth of death at the very last second.
Attaboy!
Cried George. Hooray for SULU! Cried Harold. SULU set George and Harold down to the roof of a distant building, then returned to the scene of the crime. He grabbed a few oversized novelty items from the tops of some warehouses and turned to face his mortal enemy. Chapter 24. The Incredibly Graphic Violence Chapter Part 2. Inflict
Warning. The following stunts were performed on closed streets by a highly trained professional hamster. To avoid injury, please do not grab oversized novelty items from the tops of warehouses and beat up cat monsters with them.
cane tops keep falling on my head. Yummy, yummy, yummy! I got gloves in my tummy. A hard day's bite. Chapter 25. How to reverse the effects of the COMBINE-O-TRON 2001 easy step. The Bionic Booger Boy was defeated. He flopped unconscious into a giant boogly blob that spread across several city blocks and nearly 4 whole pages as reporters surrounded the massive, oozing body. Soon, Melvin's mother and father showed up with the COMBINE-O-TRON 2000.
We saw what was happening on the news.
They said,
And we want the world to know that we're going to create a new machine that will reverse the process that turned our son into this monster. If we work together, it should only take a few months to build.
Why don't you guys just take the batteries out of that combiner thingy and switch them around?
said George.
Wouldn't that reverse the machine's effect?
Well,
Laughed Melvin's father.
obviously you don't know anything about science, little boy. You can't expect to reverse the effects of a highly complex cellular muculizing COMBINE-O-TRON just by switching the batteries around. That type of thing only happens in obnoxious children's books.
Said George, subconsciously.
Well, why don't you just give it a try anyway?
Alright.
Said Mr. Sneedley, rolling his eyes and smirking. He quickly switched the batteries around and powered out the machine.
But I'm only doing this to prove a point to you kids. It's not going to work. No way. Not in a million years. And anybody who thinks it might is a complete idiot. Especially you.
What? Me? What are you talking about?
It goes against all the popular laws of logic and science.
He aimed the newly reconfigured COMBINE-O-TRON 2000 at his son and fired. Chapter 26. BLAZZZT! Suddenly there was a terrific explosion. The Bionic Booger Boy burst into 3 huge chunks of glistening snot and twisted metal, which smacked onto 3 nearby buildings and stuck like glue. In the center of the explosion, surrounded by smoke, stood Mr. KRUPP and Melvin.
Well, what do you know?
Said Mr. Sneedley.
My idea worked.
George and Harold rolled their eyes.
Now step aside, kiddies.
Said Mrs. Sneedley as the 2 scientists marched out to tell the reporters all about their brilliant and inspirational scientific breakthrough. But as the smoke around Mr. KRUPP and Melvin began to clear, it became obvious that they were not quite back to normal. Apparently, the newly reconfigured COMBINE-O-TRON 2000 had accidentally morphed Mr. KRUPP and Melvin together.
Don't worry.
Mr. Sneedley told to the reporters.
All I need to do is zap them one more time. That should set everything straight.
He fired up the COMBINE-O-TRON 2000 again and prepared to blast away.
I sure hope this separates their bodies.
Said George. Me too, said Harold. BLAZZZT! Chapter 27. To make a long story short, it did. Chapter 28. A happy ending.
You know something?
Said George.
This is the first time one of our books actually had a happy ending.
You're right, said Harold. Usually they end with me screaming, "Oh no!" and you screaming, "Here we go again!" We got lucky this time, I guess.
What do you mean, lucky?
Said Mr. KRUPP?
It was my invention that saved the world. You guys are so immature.
Said George.
I want to see both of you bubs in my office pronto.
Yelled Melvin.
I'm gonna punish you boys so bad your kids will be born with detentions.
What? Said Harold. Suddenly a giant extendable octoclaw reached out from one of the 3 huge chunks of boogers. It grabbed the COMBINE-O-TRON 2000 out of Mr. Sneedley's hand and smashed it into smithereens on the ground. Mr. and Mrs. Sneedley ran away screaming as the 3 humongous robotic booger chunks came to life. Slowly they began dripping down the sides of the buildings, each one engineering itself with a single twin tower 900 SP5 Kung-Fu titanium lithium alloy processor. As the huge booger chunks oozed closer and closer, they began sprouting strange-looking metallic eyeballs and huge metallic robotic limbs. Suddenly, the 3 ridiculous robo-boogers leaped towards George, Harold, SULU, Mr. KRUPP, and Melvin, and the chase was on.
Oh no!
Screamed George. Here we go again! Screamed Harold.
1, 2, 3, 4, 007. All the good guys go to heaven. 5, 6, 7, 8. Hey, hey. All the rest can go away. So little time.
Tra-la-la.